Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the PRCA Festival of Culture in collaboration with Intent Health. We'll be exploring culture in lunchtime sessions across the week. We're also donating to Choose Love, which is a charity that supports displaced people and refugees. So if you can donate, make any donations, that'd be fantastic. So I think Tina's just put that in the chat, so the link's there. So in 2020, the CIPR report state of the profession reported 91% of professionals in the industry identified as white, with 86% of employ. Sorry, I can hear some background noise. 86% of people identifying as heterosexual. So today we're talking about how do we increase diversity and promote culture of inclusion within the industry. So firstly, let me introduce myself. I'm Amrit Nijja, Inclusion and Belonging Manager at Tarmac within the construction sector. I've got a background of communications, over 15 years in working in publications in the private and public sector. I'm really excited to have 5 panelists with me today. I'll let them introduce themselves. So first, I'll just go across my screen. So I've got Bhavik. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. So I'm Bhavik Pancholi. My day job is Diversity and Inclusion Manager at Mundipharma, which is a pharmaceutical healthcare organization. I've been working in this space for a number of years, and my career history spans across various roles in HR. And I feel really fortunate to be able to do a role that I'm really passionate about. And I got involved in it because I wanted to be part of change that I didn't see.
Amazing. And Suraj?
Hi everyone, I'm Suraj Banner. I'm a senior communication manager for an American pharmaceutical company as well. My career spans over 9 years, both in agency and in-house. So I started off as an intern at Weber Shandwick, working in the global comms, global healthcare comms division. I then moved over to an American biotech 3 years ago. And my role at my current company also involves being part of their inclusion and diversity employee panel to ensure that they are representing all minority communities from diverse backgrounds.
Amazing, thank you. Just going across my screen, Rachel.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rachel Rees. I have a variety of careers. In the 1980s, I was a software engineer in the defense industry. And in the early 90s, I was an HR manager. Then I trained as a lawyer. And then I was an operations director for 15 years. And now I am CEO of Global Butterflies, which is a trans and non-binary inclusion company. I'm a woman with trans history. We've been operating for 6 years. I'm a trustee of Give Out. It's an international LGBTQI charity. And I'm a mental health advocate in the workplace. So glad to meet you all.
Wow, amazing. And Adam?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Adam Sheikh. So I'm a junior account executive at Intent Health, so the healthcare communications agency that's running this event in partnership. Don't quite have the checkered, the illustrious career history of some of my fellow panelists, but previously spent some time working in medical devices and also diabetes prevention. But only been in communications for about the past 11 months. So delighted to be here. Very passionate about diversity inclusion, and yeah, looking forward to learning some things from yourselves and getting down to some discussions.
And you've got a podcast as well, which I think is great.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Johanna.
Hi, so I'm Johanna Rajaldry. I am an associate at Golan London. So I work on the tech teams. I've been doing PR in tech for maybe about 2-3 years now. I work alongside amazing teams doing on diversity and inclusion work, trying to just sort of get more people involved and work with some students, work with different community groups and see how we can get them all engaged in PR as an industry on a whole. I also work with the PRCA Equity Council that we're supporting. So yeah, I'm really just here to shout about inclusion and diversity, and hopefully someone listens.
Amazing, thank you so much. So if we just kind of dive straight in. So Bhavik, if I can come to you first, actually. So how do we go from talking about inclusion, because I think people do get the why now, to actually the how? How do we get from talking to action? So how have you done that?
So I think let's not underestimate the power of the talking piece. I've been really reflective on that point over the last over the last week, actually, because you say that people understand the why. I think there is still important conversations for us to have around why, because that why is different for lots of people. I think people understand that there is obviously it's the moral obligation, it's the right thing to do, and it makes business sense, and it's important for our people. But let's not stop talking about that. So the talking piece, I think, for me, and I guess on the journey that we're on, is still really important. So just so that we continue to remind people why. And then I guess the how is kind of linked to that. So one of the things that I've been doing is listening and understanding what are my people saying? What are the people who I work with saying that is really important to them, that they would like to see change in? So rather than focusing in, yes, there are certain things as an organization we absolutely want to and need to focus on, but what is also our colleagues saying, and how we moved from that kind of that conversation into the action is by running things like focus groups. We've had engagement surveys, and some of the basic data that we have access to, which tells us where we have either underrepresentation or some challenges, and co-creating and collaborating. So again, the next part of that journey has been working with those people who have said that, yes, this is really important to me. So people understand that it's everyone's responsibility rather than just one person.
Yeah, it's not just the IND team. Mm-hmm. No, I love that. So it's about helping people find their why. And then, everyone's going to have a different why. So you have to kind of really work with them to find their why, because their why might not be the same as someone else's. And with a business head on, it might be that commercial pound sign. Actually, our customers are wanting a more kind of diverse team and things like that. But also that listening piece, actually listening to what your employees and what your data is telling you as well. So
and also, yeah, and also people sometimes think that this doesn't impact me because I might not fit into a group that or a box, yeah. But we've all had times of exclusion of some kind, and we all remember of how that made us feel. And just this morning, we've been recording an inclusion podcast because people think, oh, it doesn't happen here. And the reality of it is, well, we have real people here too with real life experiences. So kind of getting their voices and giving them a platform to be heard too.
So Jahandra, if I can go over to you, what would you say to when people say it doesn't happen here? How do you do you have that coming up with clients when they don't want to talk about it?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, I completely agree with Babik's point. Like, the why is very different for a lot of people. And especially when we do look at whether things happen to us here or happen to us, like, as in like in a working environment or in our personal life, there is a form of discrimination along every step. And unfortunately, that is the reality for many people in their lives, is that they can't going to the shops can sometimes be a traumatic moment for a lot of people. And I think it's that sort of breaking out of your personal experience and thinking more about the collective and understanding that, yeah, like maybe visibly and like very transparently, it hasn't happened to you directly, but you don't know the conversations that happen behind closed doors. You don't know like, just even personally speaking, I've had senior people in different roles ask whether I'm appropriate to speak to clients because they may have heard me code switch and at a time with like personal colleagues, like friends or what have you. So just because like it's not happening like there in front of you or happening in that moment does not mean it does not happen. And it is then on our responsibility as, say, people who are like marginalized or what have you, is more the everyday person in a team, in your company, in your friend group. It is our responsibility as the individual to be able to ensure that whatever we do is working for the collective, and we are helping support other people who may not have either come to terms with what their identity is just yet, or what it is that they want to represent themselves as, or however they want to communicate their feelings across to the general public. We need to then create that support as individuals, that people can feel empowered or supported to be able to go have those conversations. and approach someone to say, if you know, like if someone does say something in front of me that I'm like, oh, that's a bit problematic, I can be in the space where I can say, let's unpack that real quick. Let's see what did cause that opinion to come to fruition, that you felt comfortable around me to think that you can say things like that. So it's really sort of signposting that you are of a person that, you know, just because it's not happening in front of you, I will be the one to protect you if it doesn't. I'll be that voice in the room when you're not there, kind of thing. I think if you get where I'm coming from. So I think it's just really important that we just ensure that even though the visibility is not here, that you are that visible presence in the room when no one else is. I hope that made sense.
No, that does. Thank you so much. So, Vivek, did you have your hand up? Sorry.
I was just applauding.
Sorry. That's just sort of thing. So how do we build? So is it this trust and kind of within a company? So within kind of help build that kind of trust culture and that open culture. Where would you suggest we start?
I think it's really important that we start first and foremost with our employee base. Often everyone can bring their lived experience to work and impart knowledge on areas where often senior leaders may not have that experience or insight into what it means to grow up, you know, either from a minority background or from an LGBT background, you know, or disabled background. And within that, you have intersectionality. So you have people that identify with various, you know, minority communities. And what I found throughout my career is when you've had senior leaders really take the time and actually put money behind listening and auditing and doing exercises to identify where the gaps are, which companies can we bring in to train the company to help them find those gaps. I feel that that's where, you know, a company is really putting action to their words. I agree to your point. I think, you know, there's a lot of talk around ID&E and ensuring that we represent, you know, whether it's our employers, employees, or our customers, or our clients. But we often forget, you know, we have people that work in our company as well that often can help us. So I think when you have that collaboration between experts and grassroots of your company, I think that's where the change really happens. And I've seen now, particularly in the pharma industry, a real shift to really emphasize ID&E and in particular equity. I think often equity is lost in this conversation around diversity and inclusion. I know where I work, the concept of equity and giving people equal access and equal voice is just as important as physical representation.
No, fantastic. Rachel, where have you? Sorry.
Oh no, sorry. Just to jump in really quickly. I think the listening piece there is so important, really. And I think in terms of what you're talking about earlier, how do we translate from I guess talk to action? I think if you're willing to, as a business, listen to the different stakeholders, the different employee bases, and bring those experiences in together, then that will inevitably lead to action, right? Because then if everyone feels like they're being heard, or if there is like a hierarchy of opinions, then that's what leads to, I guess, the adverse effects. And these are tricky things to talk about, right? In terms of if you're talking about inclusion in sort of a negative sense, in terms of where we've been lacking, these are quite difficult things to bring up, people's negative experiences in any capacity, let alone a professional work environment. So I think that listening piece is so important, and just to echo what Suraj said as well, talk is obviously cheap, but then companies that generally put money and dedicated resources behind these things as well, that really is what I guess cuts it from a different cloth in that sense.
Yeah, can I, just on the equity piece, I find that really fascinating because we work with lots of corporate companies and they work on diversity to make sure they recruit very well. They work on their inclusion, on pay and promotion and care, but they don't apply that, quite often they don't apply that fairly. If there are a lot of organizations that don't work on trans rights, for instance, and we see that inequality, which can topple a whole holistic approach to diversity and inclusion. Equity is really, really important. In some research that an organization that I've been working with have done in the LGBT community, for instance, in the workplace, we know that in the legal sector, that we know that males, for instance, are paid more than women. We know that. We know that lesbian women get paid more than straight women. We know that gay men get paid less than straight men. and trans people get paid less than all of them. And that really does topple that whole initiative just in LGBT rights against anything else that you're balancing. So the equity part has to be thought about. Are we being fair right across? Are we consulting all the groups, all our employees, to make sure that a holistic approach is balanced?
And how would you suggest that we engage with different groups? Because rather than, we all know about tokenism and finding the brown person over here, how would you suggest people go and talk with these groups? There's surveys, focus groups, employee network.
Well, all the above. I mean, first of all, you've got to create that environment. So for me, the senior leader needs to be shining that light down. In organizations where the senior leadership doesn't care about diversity and inclusion, then it's like walking through mud. It becomes really difficult. So that space to talk about this has to be created. The air has to be lovely and clean, so we can ask our employees in really good surveys that are set correctly. Don't set them in a sinister way. We've seen that. I'll ask you what your sexuality is. So make sure that you phrase that in a really good way and why you're doing it. Employee networks, LGBT networks, etc. Those are really, really powerful. Building it into performance appraisal, when you're sitting down and talking to, asking people, and you can just have that conversation with anybody. How are we doing? And to find out, you need to communicate.
Well, exactly. And I think it kind of comes back to trust. So why should I tell you my sexual preference? Why should I tell you my gender? What are you going to do with it? That trust, that narrative is so, so important. Yeah. Adam, why is it important to tell stories of people, to tell people's stories, would you say?
I guess because people, I think telling people stories is probably the only way. I mean, a common trope, a buzzword is bringing your whole self to work, right? Well, if you're not willing to listen to people's stories, people's journeys, then how are you ever going to expect people to bring their full selves to work? And in terms of, if we're really serious about being truly diverse and truly inclusive, being able to take people's stories, take them seriously, make sure people are listened to, they're treated with respect. And I think it's really, really important as well, because context is everything, right? That you can't have a one-size-fits-all approach. Everyone's got slightly different needs and circumstances. So if you're not willing to put the pieces together of how someone got to that stage, then and they make up your workforce, then how are you ever going to hope to create a sort of holistic working environment where everyone feels respected and tolerated? And that's kind of what we're all shooting for in the end.
The other bit I just wanted to add in there around people's stories is that for someone in my early career, hearing someone talk about their sexual orientation made me think, in a senior role, made me think, I do have an opportunity to progress here. There's somebody else like me that does exist, and there's someone who I hadn't known, I hadn't heard of, didn't know, but I connected with them. I knew that in that instant I existed and I was seen, and that I have a future here and I want to stay here, because if they can make it, I can make it. We did some conversations during Pride Month, and the number of people who were messaging about the fact that they had, and they were kind of their parenting experiences, saying, I have been going through this on my own. I didn't realize that there are other people here that I can talk to that might understand and support me. So helping to almost create that support network without engineering it, kind of holistically happening. And then the last bit is during also Pride Month, when we were talking a lot about LGBTQ plus inclusion, people saying, well, I hadn't felt safe in sharing my neurodiverse characteristics, and I've now just shared with my boss what I need to be able to do my job better, because we're talking about how we want to make people feel included for the first time. So this has made me feel like this is a safe space for me to be able to do that.
And that's why it's so important with these awareness campaigns, and so people can see that they are safe spaces, or it kind of makes pushes people to create those safe spaces.
Do
And
you mind if
especially,
I, sorry.
yeah, sorry, no.
No, sorry, no, I didn't want to interrupt. I think it's the problem with hosting these things over Zoom. Sometimes there's a bit of latency, and you're jumping
Adam,
over
you
people.
go.
I just wanted to say, I think Barvik's point about seeing someone that looks like yourself in a senior leadership position and how powerful that is. And I think especially during the context of COVID in the last 18 months, right, where we all have been working remotely, we've been away from friends, family, communities, our communities, and it's obviously been a very trying and turbulent time. I mean, for myself, I joined Intent Health 11 months ago, right at the heart of COVID, and I've met my colleagues in a professional capacity once in the last 11 months. So starting a new job, whilst not actually seeing anyone face to face and having to do everything virtually in a very alien environment, can be very disorientating. It can be very isolating. It can be incredibly lonely. So I just think the power of seeing someone, that is trans, that is a person of color, that is, female, whatever it may be, whatever that intersection might be, and
it's role modeling, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's like seeing those role models, and that's what we need, and them being brave enough to talk about their diversity and owning it. That's amazing. Yeah. That's what you want to see more of.
And with the neurodiversity point as well, this is the first workplace that I've disclosed personally that I have dyspraxia and ADHD as well, and having other team members as well that had the same diagnosis as myself, making my manager aware of that as well. So then sort of work can be structured accordingly, because it's not that it makes me deficient or it's an ailment or makes me any less of a valuable colleague. It just means that my brain functions slightly differently, which means that I excel in certain areas, and certain areas I need additional support. So yeah, and then it comes back to the previous point we were talking about in terms of how communication is so important, and open and honest communication as well is so crucial to the whole mixture.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you have senior leaders that really earmark time for things like this, I know with everything going virtual, it has allowed a lot more time, I think, to do more employee panel discussion. We've had a employee panel discussion probably once every 2 weeks at my current company, from a range of topics, whether it be LGBT topics and Black History Month, it was South Asian Heritage Month in August, and that was the first time my company did something, and we had a panel discussion there, again hosted by someone very, very senior, so they could hear firsthand people's experiences. Because I think people forget, you're at work for a long period of time. You spend more time with your colleagues than you do with your family sometimes. And particularly over the last year, you've been, in your own flat, in your own bedroom, working in isolation. And that really impacts how you perform at work, and actually being able to tell your story and how that impacts your professional interaction, I think really helps your manager understand, often why, for example, in a meeting, why aren't you speaking up? Why are you, a bit more quiet than usual on a meeting? Because things happen in your personal life that impact your professional life. And I think often employers forget that your employees are people as well. They're not just, the person on the payroll. And things happen in your personal life that, if they didn't impact your professional life, we'd all be robots. So I think that recognition is really, really important that, people have. Some people on the face of it might appear incredibly confident, high performers at work, but actually behind the scenes something might be going on. And if you can't have that honest conversation at work, then you are going to get people that are, this is my work persona, and I don't feel I can bring to put my whole self to this company.
And it has to be like a non-toxic environment to do so. When people say bring your whole self to work, I'm only going to do it if I feel safe. That's psychological safety. Jahandra, just thinking about the kind of PR and comms profession, how has your experiences been in terms of the inclusion and diversity side of things? Is there kind of anything you can suggest that people could do? Maybe it's a resourcing thing. I don't know.
Bit of a mixed bag, if I'm honest. It's been an experience. I'll put it that way. There's there's been moments where I've literally decided I'm gonna quit PR and go back to uni and get a degree in something completely different, because I'm tired of being the only ethnic person, not even ethnic person, because if there's a box, I've ticked it. So it's just very tiring and emotionally draining to often be the only person in the room that can like, to be honest, I don't want to speak about my personal experiences all the time. Like, my personal life is my personal life. And while, yeah, I bring myself to work and I am who I am, and I have nothing to hide, nothing to be ashamed of, sometimes I don't want to be a case study. I would like to just be an associate getting on with my WIP document or a briefing book. Like, I don't want to sit there and talk about why we have six straight cisgendered white women, very middle class influencers for a campaign, when easily we could have just a stunning, diverse campaign. And I don't want to be the person that every time has to say that and then be met with, yeah, but is representation that big of a deal? And that's a quote. That's a direct quote that I got from a senior. So that in itself can be an issue, and it's very tiring. And I feel like I'm on a rant right now, but like it does get a bit much. However, on the flip side, speaking of like the representation aspect, I've had incredible line managers in my life, and I've been very, very blessed to have a line manager now who's incredibly supportive, and he is going to watch this. So like, he is incredibly supportive. And it is that aspect of understanding that this person may not look like me, may not act like me, may not speak like me, but their own personal experiences have given me something to feel like if I want to discuss something that is bothering me, I'm going to be met with patience and understanding and acceptance for the whole story, the context and all, not just the situation at hand. And I think in terms of that being a factor, like how are we working with our teams? How are we being inclusive? How are we doing all of that? And like what kind of things I've come across? It's, you need to listen when people speak. No one is sitting here saying, we need more X amount of people in our team because it will be good for your pound signs. No, people are people first. Like, we are humans, and then our identifiers come. We're built of our identifiers, and we don't constantly want to have to, I don't want to make a business case for why I should have a job. I don't want to make a business case to why I want to see myself in a campaign. I'm a person and I'm a human first before I am Asian, before I am on the LGBT spectrum, before I have ADHD, before I have all working class, all of this on, like, I am a person first. And oftentimes it is the junior's responsibility to find these new diverse initiatives for us to work on and do all these like conversations and all these focus groups. And frankly, I've said, if you come to any other talks that I've done, you'll hear the same thing. We've been saying this since the day PR began. Like, for the past 20 years, we've been talking about increasing diversity, inclusion, and equity. And it's the same people who've been saying for the past 20 years. Nothing's changed, and yet we're still relying on the same voices again and again. We have now come to this new generation of PR professionals like myself, like T, like Son, like, working insanely hard to, get us out there, get more voices in the mix. And yet we're still sort of, this is a very personal opinion, I still find a lot of it is quite patronizing. People look at juniors and think, oh, isn't that sweet, they put on an event, oh, isn't that sweet, like, they're really getting our voices out there. It's like, okay, well, then let's do something then. Let's, like you said, the question earlier, move away from talking about it. We know now, we've got data, we've done our research, we've spoken to the people are screaming, for equal pay. They're looking for representation. Like, if my manager, if my manager was a South Asian woman who was also LGBT of some kind, I would feel like, damn, like that person is like me. I can then go tell my friends who will feel more comfortable to join PR. Yet we're still in this place where being hired as a woman is enough. Doesn't matter what else comes with it. It's just, oh, we hired another woman, therefore we're being diverse. We've included more women in like this level, senior, junior, whatever. Like, we're looking for, it seems right now that the industry is looking for loopholes to say that we've done the bare minimum. Let's have a focus group, or like, let's have a training session from someone, pay them like $2,000, come give us a talk and be like, that'll do. When really there's nothing being sustainable, no actions coming from it. And I think it's just a case of people having to just keep shouting until someone listens. Like I said earlier, hopefully someone's going to pay attention and we can finally get the ball rolling and stop looking at people as business cases and ways to increase profit, and actually looking at the human element and how we can bolster your campaigns. People of all walks of life can impact your campaigns, can impact your business costs. Like, there is a case to be made for it. It's just, we shouldn't have to do that to exist.
Yeah, over and over again. No, for sure.
Yeah.
You're loving the chat. So we've got, how do you create boundaries to protect your personal experiences and lived in experiences at work? like, you know, you just spoke of, so this, I suppose, could go to anyone, but that kind of just stop being the token because you are the crown person. How do you protect yourself? I guess a little bit is making sure that people ask permission before they kind of just jump to it, I guess.
I can just jump on that a little bit. I think it's also, you need to look at the benefit to yourself sometimes, because I'm all about protecting your peace. Like someone acts up, I'm like, oh, okay, we're not gonna engage. We're just gonna keep it moving. If I feel like educating you isn't gonna do it, I'm not gonna sit there and fight. I have other things to do in my life. You're not my problem. Google is free. It's 2021. Ignorance is a choice now. Like, I'm not even here for it. So when it comes down to setting your boundaries, it's realistically going in and saying, like, there's conversations I've had even at Golan that have been tough. Not saying they were bad, they were just tough because it is an education aspect and I care for my team deeply. So I'm gonna put the time in to do so. But it is also saying, I'm gonna talk to you about XYZ topic, and I'm hoping by the time you come away from it, you'll understand my perspective to ABC. And that way you're setting the expectation to what you're doing, and you're protecting your peace in it. So it's not gonna go off on a different tangent. You're not gonna start arguing or debating, whatever, because like half the time it's about human rights and like, you know, like equality just in general. So human rights are non-negotiable. We're not going to debate human rights, but we will discuss and unpack what you might be misunderstanding and how we can go from there. But you need to put yourself first in that conversation each and every time. Is this worth the effort? Am I going to leave this feeling like I've just been drained again? Or do I feel like this is going to be constructive and productive to our team as a whole, to the client, to whatever the situation is? But it is really important to understand your boundaries. And like, there's some things like, for example, like South Asian culture is like, it's an experience. It in itself can be quite limiting and quite restrictive. So there's some things I just want to talk about. If you want to talk about arranged marriage, cool. If you want to start talking about forced marriage, sorry, that's just not me. You can Google it. You know the difference. It's not that hard. But then when it comes down to stuff like ADHD or about being bisexual, about whatever, cool, let's chat, because there are still nuances that people don't understand. So we can unpack that. But then it's also just using your common sense and like, is this person just trying to come at me or trying to cause me some kind of issue?
It's that intent. It's, you know,
exactly.
You know when someone's
totally.
intent is a bit bad. Rachel, where have you seen inclusion being done well? I don't know if anywhere. And what are they doing?
Well, a lot of organisations that do this well. I mean, the legal sector, where we started 6 years ago, we don't just work in the legal sector, but when we did start, I mean, law firms aren't saints. I mean, they're doing it because they're doing it, they're on the Stone 100 and they're competitive and, you know, they wanted to do well. And what they did well was that usually somebody in one of the senior partners made a noise that they were inclusive and talked about that subject. So there was some space. There was a little bit of oil on the wheels because somebody at the top said, this might be good business. They started to look at their clients who were demanding it. Clients were starting to say, if you want our work, tell us about your workforce. What's it made up of? How do you do inclusion? And law firms went, don't know about that. So they started to talk to their networks, and networks started to form. So they were getting that flow of information that they could put into their tenders. They also realized that the dynamic of the population's changing. So, you know, we keep telling them at Global First, we bang on about the fact that, you know, Generation Z, 1 in 4 of them will change their gender expression in their working lifetime. That is their next client base. That's their next set of employees that are coming in now. If you don't get that right, well, 1/4 of your workforce is going to have a really bad time in your organization. And so are the other 3/4, because they've got one miserable quarter sitting there not being happy about how they're being treated. So law firms started to look at that sort of pervasive run through senior leadership into their HR, recruitment, gender neutral recruitment, transition management, healthcare, promotion, pay, benefits, to client facing, their security, risk, venue services, their telephone, their business development, right down to their contractors, their policy work, their networks. And they started to look at that as a pervasive thing. You can't bolt inclusion on. Some companies follow the diversity calendar. Oh, it's LGBT History Month. We'll do a bit about that this month. I know it. And then they follow the calendar and they think, well, you know what? I'm neurodiverse. I'm Irish. I'm trans. I'm a lesbian. I can attend a lot of other things other than just anything that's trans related. So try, you know, a holistic, included applied with equity is the approach. So bolting it on doesn't work. And we know that 65% of the trans and non-binary community are not out in the workplace, and if you're not seeing any visible trans and non-binary people in your organization, you're not doing something right, because they're there. They're just waiting for those holistic signs. So you do need to do it correctly. You can't bolt it on. We had a trans panel today. We've done trans. You need to do it right across your DNA. And if you get that right, you'll get lots of diverse candidates applying to you, and people will come out in the workplace and contribute to your workplace and help you be a better organization.
No, exactly. And especially to your point, in terms of the customers were starting to ask. So I work in construction, and a big, obviously, client is HS2. HS2, they are hot on this. And it's amazing, because it's really making everyone step up. And you think like the construction sector and how non-diverse it is, and there's a lot of work to do, but it's amazing, because it's, that back to kind of finding your why, that we've had to, the commercial element there. So we've all had to step up. So people like Highways England, again, another client, asking what our data looks like. Okay, so is this moving? But we've also got things like the gender pay gap report. People are, so visible what that looks like. We've got ethnicity pay gap report, which is optional at the moment, will become legislation. So again, there's stuff that is requiring people to look at themselves. So we've got kind of that leadership buy-in. We've got that listening piece. You've mentioned resourcing there. Is there more we can say in resourcing, what we can do there to kind of, especially within our teams, and how do we stop kind of just recruiting a fit for the team? Which I think back in the day, we've all been guilty of trying to find a fit for the team. But actually, if we're trying to promote diversity of thought, I know Johanna said that she was penalised by pointing things out, but that's what we want, is that the whole point of this is that diversity of thought, and then the manager to manage that conflict in a constructive way. But any kind of thoughts, Vivek?
Yeah, I know in my company, in terms of employee, when we're hiring new people, at every stage, diversity is looked at in terms of interview panel, in terms of reviewing CVs. I think all of our CVs are blinded, so we can't. There's been cases, of people, with a too African sounding name not getting picked for a job, and then applying with an English sounding name and then getting shortlisted. So we're learning from those kind of stories where we have blind applications, we have diverse interview panels. We now advertise in places where we haven't traditionally done before. We've got a partnership with an LGBT employee network where we put all of our job adverts on. So people are seeing that from those communities, not just where we normally go to. And again, with recruitment agents, we make sure that they are providing a diverse list. And if they don't, then we assess our relationship with them. So I think at every step of the stage, you need to have that consciousness around, are we making sure we're getting a mix of candidates? I think often the word best is used as a cover for getting the right candidate, when actually someone could be a bit rough around the edges, just hasn't had the opportunity to show themselves for a big employer. So I think that is a really important thing that I've learned, particularly in my current role.
No, exactly. Sorry, Vivek.
Sorry, go on, Rachel.
Oh, I just want to say on the, that was really important points that have just been raised there. I really like the recruiters bit is something that we test. A lot of trans and non-binary CVs never make it into blue chip companies. And we've tested that with some recruiters where we've put CVs into, we did one where I put my CV into a recruiter for a job that was written around my CV, and it didn't make it to the company. So make sure recruiters absolutely do value your value system on inclusion and diversity, but also if they're using AI, make sure that that's not bouncing out candidates. Trans and non-binary candidates bounced out by AI, it hates us. So, because sometimes our CVs have gaps or they don't line up in some way. So make sure that they're using AI, it's not bouncing out really good candidates as well.
The bit I was just going to add was the whole recruitment process. There is lots of points when bias will and does creep in, whether it is in the job advert and the language that's being used in actually talking about the role, right through to kind of candidate shortlisting and interviews and as I said, all parts of that. So what can we do to mitigate that? And Suraj and Rachel have given some really great examples. In terms of the recruitment partnership, I guess that's one of the big bits for me with people who we work with and our recruitment partners, making sure that they're aligned to what we want and understand why it's important to us, but also kind of asking what they do, because it is a partnership and they do this every day. So learning from them and being quite honest with ourselves and learning from things where we might not have got it quite right, and being honest and saying, hey, actually, this wasn't great, or this could have been done better or differently. Let's move on and learn from that, rather than it being, right, let's not talk about it. It didn't work well. Let's look at what we can actually do. And I guess the last bit that I am talking about and working on is that piece around cultural add. So what can people bring, rather than how can people fit in and let's just carry on doing what we've done and getting what we've always had. But what is it that this person is going to bring that they don't currently have? I almost didn't get a job a few years ago because the person said, the person who was recruiting me said, I don't get him. I don't get him as a person. I don't know people like him, and I just don't understand him. And this only came out about 6 months after I got the role, when they said to me, you almost didn't get the job because of those reasons. And now I understand what the people around me who were from more a different way of thinking than he was, who said, well, actually, this is what this person will bring to you, and this is how they will make your life easier, and this is how it will enrich kind of the whole team. And he didn't see that at that point when he was recruiting. 6 months later, as we were working, absolutely saw the fact that what I was bringing, that cultural add, rather than just trying to find someone who was that fit in to be like him.
Just to add on to that as well, which is incredible point, is when you're recruiting for the team, one thing that I think always happens is like the culture fit conversation. Because I just think it's such a narrow-minded way of looking at people, because what culture? It's a job, pay my bills. What are you talking about? And I think it's that insane focus on culture in the workplace that creates this like homogenous hive mind of teams where everyone looks the same, talks the same, thinks the same, writes the same emails. And like there's like, even like with my teams that I've just started, there's like a few new joiners who are like killing it, and I'm always telling them like, look, I'll review your email, sure, but please rewrite it, like make it sound like you. I'm not you. Like I'm gonna add in like edits or whatever, sure, yeah, cool, a little tweak here, there, blah, blah, it's only a few words, who cares? But go back into it. Does that sound like you? Is this the identity you're giving to the client or to the whoever we're working with? And when it is like that recruitment aspect of like, this person doesn't, act like me, look like me, blah, blah, like, I don't know about you guys, but I know when I've been a token hire. Like I know when I've been the diversity hire, but it's okay because I'm glad I'm the guy. It's me, because I probably am the best one for it. So I'm glad that I got the job. But then it comes to the point where it's like, what is the point of having someone, for example, like having someone like me in the team, if there is no one else around me that is similar? Because then that's isolating. That is then cause that in itself can be a traumatic experience for people. It's like you are constantly the only person in that space, like I was saying before, or having to be that voice or that diversity of thought. How can I be the only one? And like to Rachel's point, like there are people who aren't open and out and free just yet, and like they haven't found that personal liberation yet. So by having that breaking down the hive mind, you then create opportunities for other people to be open and free and liberated in the workplace. I think Suraj, you might have mentioned that we spend more time at work than we do with our families. Why would I want to be myself where I am all the time? And why are we still continuously focusing on this culture fit and recruiting people that fit into which culture? Is it the seniors culture? Is it the English culture? Like which one? Because to come into an environment, like I'm very blessed at Golan, like to be honest, like everyone is so different. Everyone has such a completely different way of life, and everyone is so open and willing to talk about their lives and engage and interact. But every now and then, as you do in any job, you will sometimes feel like, wow, I just feel really different. I feel really just stick out a bit. But then it is just like having the opportunity to speak to my line manager and be like, I feel a bit weird about this. Like, can we unpack that? And having the opportunity to talk about it. But when you're in a space where no, everyone is just the same, everyone's friends, everyone's known each other from before, different jobs, or like, even if they've been working together for like 10, 15 years in the same company, it can get a bit clicky and isolating. So I would just encourage people who have any opportunities to recruit or what have you, is maybe be the annoying voice and think, okay, just this person may not have, tens and worth of experience of PR, but that's fine. Let's bring them in. Let's invest in these people. Let's train them and let's bring them into our culture that we can create with them, instead of expecting everyone else to fit into yours. Like, I don't know what tech's meant to be like, but I started tech PR and I was like, no, I really love this, but the culture wasn't what I thought it would be. So you adapt and you evolve and you go somewhere else. But you can't, it's too much to expect that from other people. Sorry, ran over.
I just wanted to add one last bit just around, if you've done all the hard work in bringing someone who's really amazing and they are a great add to your team, to your business, then let's create the environment where they can flourish, so that they don't, then you've recruited them because they're not a mold. Don't try and make them fit into a mold once they get here, because actually you've just done a lot of the work, and actually they're probably not going to want to hang around for very long. That's
why it's so important to build the inclusion, culture of inclusion. So when people do come in, they feel included. So, that's, if you don't work on anything, work on that first. There's simple stuff as in meetings, before the leader or manager speaks, have you heard every voice in the room? People work in different ways. So have you sent out the agenda and the slides beforehand so people can think beforehand and go through the information, rather than the loudest voice in the room having their say or that being kind of done. But just back to the resourcing, what we've done and kind of started looking at is making sure all hiring managers first have this unconscious bias training. And there's also always a diverse panel. So if there's a male person, they've got a female and maybe from a different unprotected characteristic background. Also score sheets for everyone. So make sure that's filled out during the interview or just after, and values-based interviews. So, what are you proud of? But, that's one of our core values. What are you proud of? This can be something inside or outside of work, and just really seeing their passion and the enthusiasm. And like you said, and also looking at the job adverts, we haven't got it 100% right, but this is something we're striving for. And when recruiting, it's just kind of back to the unconscious bias training, is that fast thinking when people just need someone to fill the job. So they replace them with the same person or a mini version of themselves, or just recruit, a mirror version. So just getting them thinking about that. So we found that good. Adam, sorry, did you want to say something?
No, I just to kind of, I guess, agree with some of the points that have been made. I think that like when you like, I think often in those situations, culture, like companies that say this is our culture and this is our like rigid thing, right? Then it is kind of used as a stick, I guess, to beat diverse candidates with, or like, or to sort of put up the drawbridge, right? And then you get into a situation where, like you said, you do get sometimes a token. I know, like what you're saying. I know in the past I have been a token hire, and it's like, oh, one person slipped through the net. and then it's just no hope to anyone. Whereas if you do work on that inclusion piece, the rest will kind of fall into place, because you'll attract people from different backgrounds, and like you said, they'll want to stick around. It's all well getting someone into the workplace, but then if none of the foundations are there, it's about retaining them as well. And you can say, or you can have as many nice platitudes you want about investing in people. If you're not creating a culture where people see themselves in several months and years time, then people are just going to come and they are going to go. And then I think you do see that companies that don't get the diversity and inclusion quite right tend to have quite a high turnover of staff. And I think the two are not unrelated.
We can talk about.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I feel like we could talk about recruitment and in diversity and inclusion and equity for hours.
It's almost another panel, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to go to the question that's come up in the chat. I was going to put to Suraj. How do we engage staff that think EDI doesn't apply to them?
And one thing that we always talk about in my current employer, we have, I think, 4 or 5 different employee networks. So whether you're from ethnic minority, LGBT, women's network, and also we have an armed forces veterans group for servicemen and women. We place a huge emphasis on allyship and making sure people, if you want to ask a question where you feel uncomfortable, this is the right place to say the wrong thing. Because often people are so scared of offending or saying something, and I think at work it always comes from a place of ignorance, and people want to learn and develop. So we always start every meeting by saying, look, this is a place where you can ask, albeit with some caveats, this is a place where you can ask a question. You can get some of the words wrong, but if you're coming from a place where I want to learn and develop as a person, I think that in itself is half the battle. We always make sure in all of our employee resource networks that the senior sponsor is someone who isn't from that community. So, for example, on the Pride network, our senior sponsor is a very senior leader, but doesn't identify as LGBT, because then it allows him to learn from the core committee who are from that community and take their counsel on how this should move forward, rather than it being, I'm senior leader, here's your money and I want you to spend it like this. It's almost a bit more like a reverse mentoring element. So you can learn from people that you don't identify as. So I think, wherever you can bring in allies, because, any movement has to have help from people that aren't part of that movement, whether it be women's rights and LGBT rights. It's always happened in a way where the entire community has to be behind it, whether they're from that community or not. So that's the one thing that I would say to people that are struggling to include people is talk about allyship and have an ally who's willing to take part, share their story and share why they think it's important. Often you will meet, you might have an LGBT person in your family who's not out. And if you're not creating a culture where they feel they can come out, that in itself is a challenge. So you can learn things that can be applied to a huge amount of your entire life and being part of a network.
No, I love that, and I love the emphasis on allyship, and even that point with the resource groups, and that's something we did as well. So our senior board, there's only one woman on there. It would be so obvious to just make her the women's community sponsor, but we didn't. She would hope she is an ally for women anyway and champions their causes. So actually, to get someone who doesn't identify with a community and get them to learn about it and then really champion it, and we've seen it work really well. But again, with the allyship piece, is just giving people the tools about what does good allyship look like, and how to sponsor people. So not just mentor them, how to really champion them when they're not about, is really amazing. So I'm just thinking about time. Sorry.
No, just quickly. I think the fact is that some people say, well, what's it in it for me? I'm doing fine. But the fact is that we all, a lot of people, they'll develop a disability, they'll eyesight, hearing, mobility, and they'll suddenly need an inclusive workplace to be accepting, to be safe. We all, I'm neurodiverse, people develop, people have mental health issues in the workplace. And if that workplace isn't talking about those things, those people are not going to be sharing those things and be suffering in silence in your organization. So maybe they're riding high right now, but really an inclusive workplace is good for us all. And therefore people should get involved now, because the timeline is the timeline, and people will suddenly need that workplace to be inclusive at some point in their working career.
I think sorry. No, I'll be brief, I promise. I think one of the main things as well with bringing people in is if they're willing to listen, it's so much easier, right? Because ignorance in itself isn't a crime. Not everyone's going to know everything about everyone or every community, but if they're willing to listen to people's lived experiences and speak respectively, obviously, you draw the line at like all forms of bigotry, right? There's certain things that when some people say that you just shouldn't tolerate. But if they're willing to listen, then you can bring people in and you can build consensus, and I think that's what makes good allyship, and then that's what brings people in, because then everyone has a stake in it.
Yeah, 100%. I've missed a question. So Hannah asked, Rachel, how would you suggest companies approach asking about sexuality and gender? She said she's quite reserved at work.
Really good question, and thank you for asking it. I mean, the companies that do this well, I mean, they build that in right across their organization. So it's a natural thing, part of recruitment, part of performance appraisal, senior leadership talking about it, the networks talking about it. It needs to be something that's not suddenly thrust into an organization. I worked in an organization once where suddenly they had no diversity and inclusion credentials, and suddenly a survey came out and said, we need to know what your sexuality is. And it was like nobody, there was a revolution in our organization. Why are you asking this? When nobody.
Yeah.
So it needs to be as part of, we've been saying, as part of a culture. This is not something you can just sort of suddenly start doing. It needs to be your leadership, your HR, your recruitment. It needs to be pervasive. It needs to be not suddenly be thrust. It needs to feel natural to start to talk about those things. Otherwise it will you just won't get the results that you need. I mean, it was kind of like the census was a good one recently. I mean, a lot of trans and non-binary people were very there was a lot of court cases against us using the right evidence to give our sex and things, and people were very worried. When you've got a government that's doesn't really care about trans and non-binary rights right now, a lot of our community were like, oh, do I really want to tell the government that I am trans and I'm here? And a lot of my community didn't submit their trans and non-binary history to the census, even though that would have been really good for us, because the government would have then, wow, there's a lot more trans and non-binary people than we thought. But a lot of us didn't feel safe to do that. So it has to feel natural, it has to feel safe, and it needs to be pervasive right through your systems and processes.
No, completely agree. We're just really short on time. So if I could just go around and kind of top tip or top area to kind of, if people want to go away today and kind of start looking at, what would you suggest? And I know that's frustrating, just one tip, but I'm just going to go around my screen here. So Vivek, what would you suggest?
Have some of those uncomfortable conversations that you may not have had, and have them without fear.
Fantastic. Suraj?
I agree. I think creating spaces within business hours to have this conversation is really important. It's not something you do on your lunch break or you do after work. It's something that's a core part of the business.
Rachel?
My top three are leadership, knowing where your red lines are, and then passing those and be uncomfortable with them and get in there. Do what you say you're going to do, however small. Do not make a promise and then don't deliver it. You must deliver what you say you're going to deliver, or you lose all authenticity. And don't apologize for being inclusive. So if you say something positive about trans people and you get a social media pile-on, you stand your ground. Don't back down. You'll lose all your credentials and your reputation.
Amazing, thank you. Adam?
I'd say listen to people from different backgrounds, listen to people with different experiences, different disabilities. They're out there, even if you can't see them. Take them seriously, see what they've got to say. And the other thing as well, I think it's kind of ironic sometimes working in professional communications that we're not very good at communicating these sort of things. So can you just communicate at all levels of the business, be as transparent as possible. So yeah, listen, communicate.
Thank you. And finally, Jahandra.
I would say trust yourself and protect your peace, because at the end of the day, it's about you. Like you cannot serve, you cannot work if you cannot protect yourself or look after yourself and listen to your body. If something feels wrong, something does not feel right, then say something, or at least take yourself away from the situation, think about it, see how you can progress, and really try and find your allies in the space that you are, because some of the issues that I've had in my past, not even in PR, when I was in retail, it's you find that friend that is going to be there to back you in the meeting, and while you want to go to the company HR teams or what have you, listen to yourself first, trust yourself. If you feel like something is wrong, it's wrong, and you might just need to unpack it a little bit, read into it a little bit, but protect your peace first and foremost. Is it, like I said before, is this going to be worth going into? Is this something that's just coming at me for the sake of getting a reaction? What is this for? What is the true reason that this conversation is even happening in the first place? And don't back down. Like you're saying, it's important conversations to have. If someone's
100%.
talking to you in some type of way that you're not okay with it, then you say something and you stick to it, because it is about you, and you will find, and like, this life is too short. You'll find a career, the job will come again one day, you'll find happiness and you'll find stability. Do not put that on hold just because someone at this point is telling you this is all you have and this is your only option, because it's not. But yeah, protect your peace. That's it.
No, thank you, Jahandra. I could actually listen to you all day. So no, thank you so much, everyone. It's been so fantastic, and I've learned so much. And yeah, and just use this community. We'll all, you know, follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. For those that are on there, I think Rachel, you're down as Global Butterflies on Twitter. So thank you so much, everyone. So tomorrow at 12, you can catch Son Farm's The Nomad: How to Develop PR Strategy in an Intercultural Context. So hopefully you've all signed up to that session. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. It's been really fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.